So Dr. Susan Trudeau has a PhD in information systems technology, and over the last 12 years, she's been working with local and global teams in South America, in the US, in Europe, and in the UK to implement effective processes and systems across the full value chain in the fresh produce industry. So as an attendee of this very important discussion today, you will know very well and understand just how the changing local and international situation has impacted producers literally around the world. Never before has the rate of change been as great and more disruptive. So Dr. Susan's academic background and a passion lies in understanding the change that we are facing and how to manage it more effectively. Without it, literally, our industry may not survive. Dr. Trudeau's concern and the reason for the discussion today is that the fresh produce industry in South Africa does not seem to be initiating an industry-wide discussion with role players across the value chain, that we could look at what should we do and what to do to manage the supply chain more effectively. So without further ado, Dr. Trudeau, thank you, and over to you.
The world is different from what it was 12 months ago. And in the way we work and what we do in engaging with fresh produce producers, packers, and exporters, we became aware of the discussion around the problems that the industry is facing. We're discussing with our clients the produce rotting at harvest, literally, international markets shrinking, logistical problems that's come about in the last 2 years, and then more recently, vessels returning from Europe with undelivered goods due to the war in the Ukraine. But we also have over the years experienced leaders in this industry as being very, very creative and having a resilience to solve problems and coming up with solutions for every challenge. What we do know is that the rate of change that we have to contend with at the moment is more disruptive than what it has ever been. At least what I have experienced in my lifetime, and I think you would agree that most of you have never experienced something as disruptive as we've seen in the last 2 years. The status quo will most probably not return to what it was 2 years ago. And that is why we wanted to invite you to this discussion. Today is a kickoff for a number of sessions. We plan to engage with you to have a discussion where we want to invite business strategists, process engineers, and systems experts to explore solutions and options whilst we are at this crossroad. And it's a crossroad for the industry, but it's also a crossroad for the world. We do acknowledge that there are industry experts and structures and forums and formal associations. And we believe these can contribute to this discussion and that we can then together elevate this pursuit of trying to find solutions in this discussion. We also found in the way that we work that you can learn lessons from other industries. You can find similarities and you can fast track what you do from the lessons you learn from other industries. And that's the reason why I actually opted for the discussion today to invite industry experts from other industries to share with us their views on what we see in this industry and what we experience in this industry, to see if we can draw parallels from those industries. So I therefore want to introduce to you firstly Dr. Johan Rousseau, who specializes in information systems change management. He completed his doctorate degree in 2020. He has substantial experience in management and implementation of business systems. and has recently served as a senior change consultant in the implementation of a national rollout of an enterprise-level ERP business system in South Africa. I specifically invited Johan to participate in this discussion to share with us ideas around human resources and the management of change in these uncertain times, where we need to make decisions fast and we need to make it with precision. Then I've also invited Marinus du Plessis, who performs a consulting and an advisory role for industry and academia by sharing his 36 years of knowledge and expertise in technology management and innovation. He's also involved in startup companies where he shares his entrepreneurial expertise. Some of his previous and relevant roles include strategic advisor and lecturer at the university, and he is a group manager of innovation and project evaluation at Exaro Resources. I invited Marinus to participate in this discussion to broaden our thinking about challenges business managers are facing and how we could approach it within the context of the fresh produce supply chain. So how do we want to structure this hour? Marinus and Johan, who are experts from the manufacturing and the technology industry, will open the discussion by talking about the nature of change and how change brings about opportunities and challenges and how it affects these opportunities and challenges that we have been talking about in this industry over the last 2 years. And then what I would like to do is to open the discussion to you so that we can then look at the supply chain in the industry and we can jointly discuss how this view about the change and the nature of the change, how that affects the opportunities and the challenges that we are currently facing. What we're trying to do is to collectively identify opportunities and challenges that we need to manage and try to find answers for those. I would like to invite you to post questions and statements in the chat box. You can post it to myself or Darlene. And what we will do is we will administrate this session. And then in the end, there will be opportunity for you and we will pose those questions to the experts and try to find that answers for those. And what we will also do is see which are relevant for next discussions. All of it will be sent to participants in this session if we run out of time and we cannot address all of them in the session. So Marinus, I know that you have years of experience in manufacturing, and I would like you to share with us your views on how you would advise managers in the fresh produce industry to look at the turmoil that we are currently facing.
Susan, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, I think from my background, which also includes strategy, we've looked at what happened the past couple of years, and the whole idea is to try to see what happened, how can we apply the lessons learned also in different industries. So yes, we all heard about change is the only constant. We're hearing about the new normal. What does all these things really mean for us, and how can we actually learn from others? And then once you understand where you're coming from and what happened in the business world out there, we can apply those and change our business accordingly. And the whole idea is to try and grow our business and to be successful. Now, if you look at this couple of years past, especially with COVID in mind, and you see what the global trends were that changed the business environment that we must take note of. The most obvious one is probably that we experience an increased cost of living. All of us fully feel it in our own pockets, but the consumers and our customers certainly as well. We hear every day from inflation increases, and that result in people not having money in their pockets. Digitization is another obvious one that COVID brought on our path. It's not only with communication, there's ways how people commute, there's ways how people change their patterns, what they buy and how they pay and how things are delivered to them. We also have supply chain changes. We have things that people are, there's different buying patterns that happened. So all these things we must take into account. From a business point of view, we saw that there are less people in the shop. There's a reduction in your sales, which is obvious result of COVID, and that has got a really a big impact on business that we must take note of. Hopefully, we are moving out of those circumstances, but we must always learn from them. A typical black swan event like this one can happen again and can impact differently, but we must learn from this. Energy scarcity and high cost, especially in South Africa, we don't have a supply of energy that we can rely on. We see where the fuel prices are going, the oil prices impacts all over the world. And in terms of changing customer patterns, people tend to buy differently. They think differently about what they buy. All these things are background that we can learn from, and we must unpack to see where we must go with our business. Other issues to consider in general for the agri business in South Africa, especially, it's also global climate change. We are feeling the impact of climate change. We must consider that in the way we manage ourselves. There are regulatory issues that we are all aware of. Unemployment and crime is, especially in South Africa and in the rural areas, a big problem that we must consider in the way we plan our business. Land expropriation, energy scarcity, environmental sustainability is a global issue that we are all aware of, that we must consider, as well as the social responsibility to not only the people that are working for us, but also the communities in which we operate. Now, how to change disruptions into a business opportunity? You'll see the whole idea is to do something, to learn from the past, to learn from all these issues and trends, and see what can we translate into an opportunity for our business. And the focus is on growing our businesses. Now, the customer must be front and center of our thinking. Benefit from changing customer patterns. They are changing. We must adopt, or we must be part of the change to benefit our business from that. Focus on value for money. And that's not only on for each of ourselves separately, but as a collective within this whole sector. We must add value for each partner. We must make sure that the farmer gets the best deal, but the trader and the agents also get their fair part of this value. We are relying on each other. Reducing costs and simplify operations, that's paramount to do. We can utilize new technologies to try and improve. to optimize the value chain. Now, that's a very important aspect for me. We must see where we can simplify the value chain, optimize it, change things in order to reduce the cost of our operations. And the outcome will result in perhaps cheaper prices, but higher value for us. And that's an area we will have to work together. We can't do the optimization and receive the benefit from that if we don't work together. Then the trend of digitization and IT system utilization has got quite a number of aspects that we must look at. With that, we can have a better end-to-end visibility. We can have a better connection with our customers. We enhance communication between ourselves and with our clients. We should have better forecasting of faster changing patterns in the business. And it's very typical of any business, but specifically in this case as well, where stock visibility is paramount. We must understand the market trends. We can streamline our administration with digitization. We can have a better forecast view if you use big data, weather patterns, market intelligence, and forecasting models that we can use. Importance of transparency and accountability is more and more an issue all over the world, and businesses are really in the limelight, and we must make sure that we are transparent and things are visible, and that we the way we actually manage ourselves, that there is no problem from a customer point of view in the way we do things. Improving our company culture is another opportunity. I think the essence that we learned from COVID is that companies that survived are mostly those that had the proper culture to adapt quickly and relied on teamwork, were transparent, and had surviving thoughts to make it work. Now we must change towards a growth opportunity, opportunities that we must use and utilize. And that culture must change, and we must make sure that the culture of our companies are sound to face the future. Externally orientated, we should adopt a win-win approach, and we must understand that to share knowledge between ourselves and between other players in our value chain does not necessarily give away our competitive advantage. Competitive advantage lies with what you actually change and do on your farm or in your business. So let us rather share and help each other, and to the benefit of our whole business sector. In order to do that, and I would suggest we must unpack all those aspects, and then we can build a new operating model, or adjust the operating models of our business, where we focus on growth. We play a leadership role in each of us to actually change the way we do things. When we consider changing things, how we do things, it's important to always look at different avenues, different options, and select the best one. So proper planning, proper investigation, but eventually ranking and selection of the correct solutions and actually apply that. And then only we will achieve success. We must be much more agile because things are moving fast. Change is the only constant, as we said. So yes, we must be able to support our decision making to be faster, quicker, and more effective. And then we must implement this decision. So our operating model doesn't give us time to do things like in the past. We really have to move along with our decisions. And for all of this, we need to have an innovation approach. We must try to grow our business. We have to change things, introduce the new, and take risks, and make sure that we are successful and we will thrive in future. So there's a quote for you that supports the principle that you really have to grow to survive. So if you look at these opportunities, what do you actually need in general as summary to make this work? What we say is we must start with a growth mindset. We must innovate, must be introduce more digital activities within our operations and in our value chain. We must improve our technologies. We must improve our market performance, and we must also make sure that our capabilities supports all these new initiatives.
Thank you, Marinus. It's actually quite interesting. It's actually, let me just do that quickly. I am unmuted. It's actually quite interesting to think about growth in these times where one is quite nervous and you want to keep your assets very close to you. So that was very interesting insight. Johan, over and above all the aspects that we have mentioned now in terms of our operations and our monies, the aspects we are also confronted with the complexity of the human aspect. Can you please share your views on this subject with us?
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I think to a certain extent we refer to people as human resources, but one must forever keep in mind that although we refer to human resources are in fact people, and we need to consider them as such. So understanding innovation and the associated trends in change within the business perspective is key to form an understanding of where human resources need to fit in. We therefore need to consider a number of important pointers to guide our thinking regarding the role of resources in a changing environment. In this regard, there are quite a few prevalent discourses in South Africa centering around where people or human resources from a business perspective need to fit into society. Now, the examples that I'm going to briefly discuss is mainly from a South African context, but for our overseas attendees, I think in your own country, you might find similar discourses or even some unique to your country. So without further ado, let's look at a few of these discourses. Most of the current discourses in South Africa revolve around historic challenges. These challenges frame the position and status that people have in society. these discussions table a lot of issues that we do not always all agree with, but are nevertheless very important in understanding the way that people fulfill various roles or perceive their roles in the agricultural sector as an integral part of any country. I've listed four prevalent discourses currently in South Africa. Let's share some ideas about each of those. The political dispensation in South Africa is mainly entrenched in the Constitution, and as part of the democracy in South Africa, it regulates equal rights for all South Africans. To a large extent, it aims to address a number of disparities of the past. Perhaps relevant to this particular topic is the fact that although historic perspectives are being addressed, human resources are more than just the workers. It also encompasses management and owners. There are a lot of various stakeholders in the agricultural sector that we all need to consider as part of human resources. The next discourse, very relevant to this discussion, centers around the Bill of Rights and Human Rights. South Africa has a Bill of Rights that actually enshrines the rights of all South Africans, and it actually specifies or governs an environment where all South Africans are to be treated equally. One must, however, be mindful that in this environment, or regarding human rights, there are quite a few institutional committees in South Africa guarding the democracy and labor relations issues such as Black economic empowerment and affirmative action. Now, I don't think it is suitable for us to perhaps discuss those issues today, but one must, however, be mindful that Black economic empowerment and affirmative action has a serious impact on human resources in the agricultural sector. The regulatory framework, it comprises mainly legislation. Legislation in South Africa changes from year to year, and to a large extent, it governs the labor relations in South Africa. It has of late become more prevalent with regard to the protection of the right of farm workers. Now, let me just cite one example in this regard. For those of you who follow the news in South Africa, you would have seen that the new Act on Labor Relations will actually allow the Minister of Trade and Industry to specify specific sectors to be targeted for affirmative action targets and Black economic empowerment targets. And this will directly impact human resources, not only as far as farm workers are concerned, but also as far as management is concerned, and for that matter, all involved in the value chain of the agricultural sector. Because, or why? Because people are the main enabler of everything we do. And the challenge with people is you cannot always fix everything by throwing money at it. Sometimes you need to consider the human factor or consider people as people. So people have basic needs, and we find that with different classes or economic classes in South Africa, people are driven by different basic needs. And that has just become fairly evident in the large number of strikes that we find in South Africa. A lot of protests, a lot of labor actions. And in some other way, those involved in the value chain need to take cognizance of this and find a way to manage the change associated with the requirements of people in terms of their basic livelihood, their financial position, and the way that they perceive themselves to fulfill some other role in the agricultural sector. Okay. So those are just a few of the current discourses in South Africa that we need to take cognizance of. What are a few of the other pointers that we need to consider when discussing human resources in the agricultural sector? I've listed a few there: lack of skills and nature of farming, the disconnect between stakeholders, integration, empowerment, unlocking business information, changes in behavior since the COVID-19 pandemic, and bridging the disconnect in the agricultural sector. So let's look at the lack of skills and the nature of farming. The nature of the labor force in the agricultural sector, and more specific, the farming sector, comprises a conglomerate of seasonal, migrational, temporary, and permanent workers. This does not always represent a stable, skilled workforce. A large part of the technological skill pool in the agricultural sector sits in the management component of farming, a world apart from a partly skilled or even unskilled workforce. Then, let's not discard the impact of unemployment in South Africa. South Africa has a substantial array of mega farmers, but also a large group of subsistence farmers, which leaves us with the problem of how to get them all together around the table to address the whole skills problem in South Africa, and more specifically in the farming sector. The disconnect between stakeholders. The respective stakeholders in the agricultural sector are to a large extent representing a number of islands. Role players may be disconnected based on the level of literacy regarding technology, the ownership of land, economic status, and access to resources, which again leaves us with the question, where do we find common ground to bridge the gap between these islands? One example in this regard might be integration across the distribution or value chains in the agricultural sector. We talk of horizontal and vertical integration needs to build on consensus and the nature of requirements to integrate. No one must be left behind in the endeavor to establish end-to-end integration in the value chain. Perhaps let me explain the concepts of horizontal and vertical integration by our understanding thereof. Horizontal integration, we typically refer to integration across components in a particular sector, while vertical integration refers to integration within each of the components of the sector. So we need both of those to have effective integration. Which leaves us with a question, and I'm posing a lot of these questions because they might at a later stage stimulate some of our discussions in terms of where do we need to go when we're talking of the integration or when we're talking of human resources. So the question that we need to consider here is, what must be done to kickstart integration? or what does that integration look like? Then another point to consider is empowering people towards synergy. In short, we describe synergy as a system being stronger than the total sum of each separate component. This builds on integration and, or let's say vertical as well as horizontal integration to ensure that we actually achieve synergy in the agricultural sector. Empowerment in this regard needs to address financial, political, and last but not least, ICT empowerment. Empowerment needs to enable people to contribute and add value when integrated into the value chain as part of enablement. Some questions perhaps for discussion later. How should we then improve the literacy of role players in the agricultural sector? And what must be done to address the current lack of synergy? Unlocking business information. Information communication technology as an enabler of accessing and using information and business intelligence need to be at the disposal of all stakeholders or role players. The correct information at the correct time to the correct people across the value chain. ICT literacy involves more than just using a cell phone, which is almost like where most South Africans are at the moment. Everybody's got a cell phone. So how do we piggyback on that? So mobile devices do in fact offer a start, but perhaps not the complete solution. Without ICT literacy, unlocking information is going to be challenging. The change in behavior since the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has put additional financial strain on the agricultural sector. And we've spoken of some of the issues like unemployment, Black economic empowerment, and affirmative action. People are constantly thinking of how are they going to survive, and survival of, or the thinking of survival sometimes detrimentally impact what we need to change from a value chain perspective. So the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the livelihood, income, and basic needs of a lot of people across the value chain. And now we're not just talking farm workers, we're talking large, small business. So the question then is, what is required to alleviate this situation and create an environment conducive to integration when we're talking of the livelihood of people? So we need to rethink the way that we do things and bridge the disconnect. What is the new normal? Is that perhaps the answer, or perhaps not? I leave you with the question, if we need to rethink the role of human resources, what are the issues that we need to rethink to bridge the disconnect and plan towards end-to-end integration? What must change? I thank you.
Sorry, always like, thank you, Juan. I do appreciate this discussion. In the end, also one of my passions, it is all about people. And we really cannot deny that. Rinus, if you don't mind to move to the next slide. What I would like to do now is for us to open the floor to you as a group. I've listed some key points here while we look at this picture of the supply chain. One of the takeaways that I have, and you might have many more, I believe, from this discussion is, in change, there is an opportunity. If you don't take advantage of that opportunity, someone else will take advantage of the opportunity. Then also that there's an opportunity in terms of growth, and leadership must take lead in growing to fund sustainability. To be a sustainable business, you must grow, which is sometimes a bit counterproductive if you're living in an era where there's a raging war going on in your target market. But you need to grow. And then it is about empowerment of people, connecting people, informing people, integrating people. For this discussion and to get the process going, I would want to suggest that we think or focus our thinking along the supply chain. So it's not looking at each area of the supply chain necessarily, but looking at bringing the components of the supply chain together and looking at the value that can be harvested by working together in the supply chain to address these opportunities. I'm going to take a moment and see if there are any questions coming through. There's already one. I just want to see if there are more questions coming through, and then we can start to address some of those questions and opinions from the group. If there's anyone that would like to either just talk on the group, or you can just post a comment in the chat. If you don't know where the chat is in the Zoom platform, what you can do, you go to the bottom of the screen and there's a little bubble to the left, in left side of the middle, if I can put it like that. There's a little bubble where you can post a comment. I'm going to give it a moment if there's anyone that would like to ask something or comment on this discussion. I think there is someone that would like to comment from Snyman Erasmus. Can I hear what you would like to say?
Hi, Susan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, do you think that there are ways in which traceability from the farmer to the consumer can be implemented without increasing the cost in the supply chain?
Yes, I think what I would like to do is, I definitely think that there are many ways to do that. Traceability is obviously a key requirement in this industry. Marinus, you would agree that traceability was also a requirement in the industry where you come from. So you can maybe talk with me on that, traceability is something that can be implemented purely by implementing integrated software solutions, by having proper business processes in place, that you can have recording and business processes throughout from your farm to your consumer. And if you do it in an automated manner, you will reduce your cost. Marinus, do you want to contribute to that?
Yes, maybe. I think the first step is to recognize the need to consider the value chain as an end-to-end value chain that involves everyone. Because the approach should not be to say, this is my piece of information and that is yours. Once we consider that everyone can benefit, and then the whole will benefit by sharing. I think that is the starting point. Once we are in the mature level of recognizing that the value chain must be managed in that way, then only we will see the benefit. And then obviously the IT systems these days, there's a lot to provide for to enhance communication and sharing in order to support better management systems. I don't know if that contributes.
Yeah, and also, Marina, something I thought about is not to think about the value chain as your own value chain. It's almost like a collaborative, collective value chain. If you start to export on your own, whereas you can collectively look at distribution channels, and then I think that's where significant cost savings could come in. And that's a different thinking. That's where we've seen that in the last 2 years. In many ways, people make better progress than individuals working on their own. And that's where I think about the idea of my own supply chain versus collectively working together, and maybe even across industries. I see Davy wants to make a comment.
Yes, just a question. I think it's been discussed the importance of employee enablement and the empowerment of our human resources. But in the industry, there's quite a big portion of looking of digitization and mechanization of labor and reducing that. So can both of these live together, and can there be benefits out of this, or how would you handle these type of scenarios?
That your idea is that you have the mechanization and then the empowerment of the employees. Johan, you can talk on that topic. I'll talk with you on that. I have my views on that, but let Johan, our guest speaker, speak first about that. It's about empowerment as well as mechanization, the two worlds living together, the human and the machine.
Yes, thank you, Susan. I earlier discussed horizontal and vertical integration. I think to a certain extent, to empower people, you have to have visibility on your environment, understand what the environment looks like end to end. And then once you're able to have accessible data, then you can empower people through providing them with applicable technology on the appropriate level, and also then provide them with the necessary information or business intelligence to empower them. Because when we're talking empowerment, we're not just talking people to do physical or manual labor. We're talking of the cognitive approach, or the understanding your position in the value chain, to be able to partake in decision making, partake in processes, partake in improvement of technology. So there are a lot of spin-offs that might come out of empowering people through the use of technology and information.
Yeah, I almost want to reinforce it a little bit. In my view, mechanization doesn't necessarily mean replacement of people. It means empowering people. It means educating people and taking them to a new level of empowerment. And that is upliftment. So in that way, we're creating a better environment for everybody, and we are actually taking care of people's basic needs, a need to earn a better living. So that is a little bit of a sentiment on that side, in terms of if we can do that right. And we have seen that. We have actually seen that where we teach people technology, and when they start to become empowered. I see Steinman Erasmus has another comment to make or question.
It's Krunya speaking. I just have a question regarding the previous point we had about the supply chain, or the information in the supply chain. And I understand that it is in advantage to work together in the markets, but how does this not affect the competitiveness and that the trade secrets you have not get leaked?
I'm going to pose this to Marinus. Marinus, you have a very interesting philosophy, or actually research that you know about, in terms of when is knowledge, when does it contribute to your competitiveness and when it doesn't. So if you mind sharing that with us a little bit, can can I give this one to you?
Thanks, Susan. Yes, it's always a very sensitive matter. And the first thing is that every participant must, on the one hand, have an open mind to share, but on the other hand, can make the decision what not to share. But what we've seen in other industries like the minerals industry is if you do what we call pre-competitive research. So if information is available for everyone, then that information per se is not the competitive advantage. It's actually how you apply that. And then you can have the benefit of that. So if you talk about types of information that falls in that category, that everyone gets the same information, but maybe due to your specific application or drivers of your farm or your business, you can apply differently from someone else, and you might get a better benefit, a bigger benefit from that, or you might even not be able to use it at all. So yes, it's a fine line, but I think if one focuses on sharing information where the different role players in the value chain will all have some benefit to have that information, and that the value chain as a whole will benefit from that, so that value is added, and then we can look at distribution of that value. So I don't know if I answer your question, but yes, there's certainly specific trade secrets that you don't want to share. I think just another comment, the diversity of the farming community and business also makes it a bit more complex. The size of your farm, whether you export, how diverse your products are, all those things, and do you have your own distribution facilities and packaging or not? In other words, how far you managing downstream in the value chain? All those things differs from farmer to farmer, and in certain cases, the bigger farmers share information that the smaller farmers might benefit more from because they're not on that level yet. So all those things plays a role, but I think we must take the first step to see what can we share that will benefit others without not being to the detriment of ourselves.
Thank you, Marinus, and that's probably where we need to conclude this discussion. I think one of the aspects that would be interesting to explore more is specifically this data and information in this supply chain. What can be shared? I'm also thinking about blockchain specifically, which is sharing of data, and it is sometimes also your entry into certain markets. I know that you need to contribute to blockchains to be in markets internationally. So what I want to suggest is that we then try to schedule a follow-up session in a month's time, where I specifically will get an expert on blockchain, and we have a discussion around information, data, and sharing information in structures such as blockchain, and what that means. We will try to schedule the next session on the 13th of July and follow that then up with a discussion around information sharing and enabling the supply chain in these type of data and information sharing technologies. With that, I think we're at the end of our discussion. I would like to thank you for your time. We appreciate your attendance, and we will make sure that you get the information that we've shared to everybody. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much.